Sanford Police Department, this line's been recorded. This is Renee.
Hey, can I get an officer?
Your name?
George.
What's going on there, George?
I'm with the Neighborhood Watch, and we've had some burglaries and vandalisms lately. And this gentleman was walking in the neighborhood. I've seen him before on trash days, going around picking up trash. I don't know what his deal is.
You know about arsonists?
It's black.
They get a thrill from setting fires. Daily life is low-level depression. But then they set a fire and get a rush, a thrill. And often they can't resist the scene of the crime. They want to watch. They want to watch that house burn to the ground. So they set a fire and retreat to the shadows to watch all hell break loose. They're having a grand time watching everybody run around struggling to put out this fire. People are risking their lives left, right, and center. And the arsonist? He's an oasis of quiet enjoyment. George, the neighborhood watchman, was like an arsonist. No, he didn't set fires, not literally. He just tried his damnedest to burn people's lives down. We have an idealized notion of a neighborhood watch person. We think they are protecting our property. But that's not what they got with George Zimmerman over at the retreat. Those residents got a police informant / fire starter. And isn't it odd that on that night when Trayvon was murdered, that none of the 911 callers indicated they recognized their neighborhood watchman? After the police arrived and the lights went on, nobody said, "Hey, I think that's our neighborhood watch guy, George." And if we believe the idealized notion, then we imagine George knocking on doors and introducing himself as a new volunteer, so folks wouldn't wonder when they saw him out and about. They wouldn't think he was a stalker or a pervert or something. Well, what actually happened was George had that community under surveillance. And he wanted anonymity, even going as far as saying so to a dispatcher on one of his many, many calls. He didn't want his neighbors to know that he was the one who called the police this time or that time. And George was more spy than community servant when he reported an open garage door and added a description of the contents of the garage. Electronic parts, he said. Neighbors don't cotton to that kind of thing. I wonder how the retreat folks feel about George leaving them holding liability for a murder he committed. It must be a shocker to read your address online on a police report given by George, to read that he was telling the cops what you had in your garage. So was it really the outsider that George was watching? Or was it the residents? And why did he get to decide who to report? I mean, if George was watching everybody, then who was watching George? Well, now I am watching George. I am profiling him. Me and millions of people around the world are following the trail he left behind. We are listening to his thoughts narrated on police dispatch audio. And we are seeing a man on the edge. I bet it never occurred to him that he'd be the subject of scrutiny the way he secretly scrutinized others. If he'd had thought about it, he'd have kept his mouth shut. He wouldn't have volunteered his harsh opinion of a complete stranger, for example, a stranger who he later killed. Fucking asshole? Really? That kid was just walking down the street. So we get to profile George now. And we see that he wasn't a neighbor. He was an informant. We hear the excitement in his voice as he makes another call to dispatch. We hear as he starts out kind of coy. Then he's off to the races, his words tumbling out like he's full to the brim of them. No doubt excited at the mayhem that was about to ensue in somebody's life. We sense that George, and occasionally his wife too, took to this cop calling as a kind of couples entertainment, bonding activity. We hear George say his wife ID'd burglars, but we see on the burglary reports that the only witnesses of a burglary were 2 men, and that perpetrator was caught. We hear George tell dispatch that Trayvon looked to be in his late teens, but in his supposed heartfelt apology to Trayvon's parents, he lies and says he thought he was a little younger than his own age. We hear the prosecutor allude to a text or email message sent from George's phone that references the victim's father, Tracy Martin. And we wonder exactly what was in that message that the prosecutor knows, and exactly when was that message sent. We see that before he became a murderer, George Zimmerman was not only a liar, a weirdo, and a creep. He was also a fucking asshole. Thanks for listening.